Welcome to Diasporaa, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya Mehta, and each week we sit down with individuals who have made the journey over and explore their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives on adapting to a new culture while staying connected to their roots. Today, we are joined by Zoya Brar, a serial entrepreneur based in Blaine, Washington. Originally from Punjab, she spent time in various cities in North India like Chandigarh and Ludhiana and Delhi. She spent time at Google and then founded Core Diagnostics, which is a venture-backed company from which she had a successful exit. She eventually moved to Canada and joined Eli Health as a CEO. And since 2023, she lives in Washington State and is building Molecules and Mothers, which is a new venture at the intersection of caregiving, early life biology, and intergenerational stories. Wow, so much to talk about here. So, Zoya, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I usually ask my guests if their Indian hometown was a city in North America, what would it be? But we've kind of covered these cities. So if Blaine were a city in India, what would it be?
I honestly, it wouldn't be a city in India. The number of people here in this city would probably fit like a small street.
City block, yeah.
Not even a block. I would think just like a little mohalla, like a small like gully in India would be the entire population of Blaine.
Yeah.
So no, I can't think of any city, probably a village. So I would think my grandmom's village would come closest to it. Yeah.
I would agree with you for a slightly different reason. So, India is in a tough neighborhood. We don't really have too many neighbors we can cross land borders with as a matter of routine, let alone cross over to buy groceries like people in Vancouver come to Blaine for. So if I were to think of a small border town where you could drive across to a friendly neighbor, it would probably be some random town on a Nepal border. Exactly. For our listeners who don't know, Blaine is on the border, smack on the border on the US side. On the other side is, Surrey, which is a part of the Vancouver metropolitan region. It's one of the busiest border crossings on the US-Canada border, which is the world's longest land border. And it's actually a nice town with a seafront where you can you visit, spend half a day, go to the Peace Arch Park, which is a beautiful park on the border. And it's something that you can definitely check out. So how do you find Blaine as a place to live?
I often tell people the story about Blaine because it's so unique. The Peace Arch Park that you just mentioned, I don't know if your listeners know this or not, but is the only place where both Canadians and Americans can go without border control. So you can actually go and meet people from either side. And it was the most happening, I think, place probably all over this part of the country during the pandemic because the borders were shut. So families were still meeting, putting up tents and things like that. So it's an interesting, very unique place. We get to literally stand at like a 2-minute walk from here and look at the border and see the wait.
Yeah.
So it's nice. I like that it's slow and calm because I have 2 young kids, and having grown up in Delhi and all that hustle bustle, this just is great for my nervous system. And like I can like hear myself think. So I like it, but I don't think it's a long run thing for us. Like I'm a city person, so big city person. But for now, I love it.
Yeah, I felt that way when I moved to Vancouver from Bombay because we have, some of our larger suburbs in Bombay have more people than the city of Vancouver.
For sure.
And my wife hated it because she missed the pace of Bombay. So I agree with you that it's great for a temporary few years when you're kind of gathering thoughts and doing something that requires intense focus like parenting or a new venture. But I think people in India are usually cut out for bigger cities. So you grew up in different places in North India. What was it like growing up in Punjab especially?
So I guess the place I relate most with is Delhi. So even though I know how to read, write Punjabi and my family is Punjabi, but I never felt like that's fully at home for me. I was always like a big town girl. Nobody should judge me for being a Delhi girl, but I am. So in every way. But I think the 4 years I actually spent when I was grown up in Punjab was after my parents got separated, and my mother moved us back, me and my brother, to live with my grandparents. So we're living in this huge house with 14 people, 4 cousins. So it was a party all the time. And we never needed anyone else. It was like this huge, like we just had each other and it was great. So despite the fact that, I was going through the fact that my parents were getting separated, I was actually having a lot of fun. Other than that part of the memory, I don't have any like specific memory of growing up in Punjab beyond, like it felt the same. So yeah, but I
So,
love growing up with a
but
family though.
if you're Punjabi in Delhi, you're not really an outsider because
Yeah.
there is a very large Punjabi population.
Yeah.
It's like me being Gujarati in Bombay. It's, one fourth of the population is Gujarati. So you're never really technically an outsider.
True.
And, anyways, I think Punjab has an outsized influence on Indian music, Bollywood, but also of India's impression outside of India.
For sure.
What a lot of people call Indian food is usually Punjabi food.
Yeah.
And same with music. So uh, do you have any thoughts on Punjab's outsized influence, especially Canada being where a lot of Punjabis are? So are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, for sure. I think I can say this because my community, we are just really loud and we are really boisterous. And when you are that way, and not all Indians are, even though people like to think of us that way as a lumped
Yeah,
up category, but like
yeah,
a lot of communities are much more docile. So I
yeah,
think anything we do is bigger, more flashier, and by that
yeah,
definition, it gets noticed more. So I
sure,
think that's part of it. But also, I think as a group, we are generally more just life loving. Like we like to
yeah,
have fun, we like to party, we like to do things like in that spirit. And when you look at it, everybody wants to join that, and it's something that's kind of pretty attractive, I would say. So I think that's part of the reason Punjab has had that kind of influence. As far as moving to Canada is concerned, I actually had a bit of a cultural shock when I came here and
yeah,
I saw the hoardings in Punjabi and like every
yeah,
other restaurant. I was like, oh my god, like where did I show up? Because like I said,
yeah,
I grew up in Delhi and I thought Delhi it has Punjabis and Punjabi influence, but it's not. Canada is a lot more Punjabi than
yeah,
especially this part of Canada. So it took me a bit of a while, and even the people that I met were, I guess, more Punjabi than I was,
yeah,
and they would just break into Punjabi with me, and I was like, I can't talk like that. Like, can we speak in Hindi or English?
yeah.
So it was interesting. I guess I had a reverse cultural shock in some ways.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you're not the typical demographic of Punjabi who moves to Canada. I've seen a lot of people who move as students or in, more primary industries and things where like a lot of hard work is required, right?
right.
Like the first wave was farming and trucking, and then since then it's been a lot of people who work in like food service. So I always perceive Punjabis as a very hardworking culture and especially Sikhs, right? Because in Bombay, you have a saying that you'll never ever find a Sikh asking for money on the
Yeah.
street because
Yeah.
they're always hard work focused and in fact you'll find the opposite. That there's a big philanthropy angle to it and a community service angle to like
Yep.
everyday Punjabi life is what I found. A couple of points here to make. When COVID had happened, air had cleared up all over India, and there were all these articles that the air is so clean in Dehradun that you can see the Himalayas. And I saw a meme which said that the air is so clean in Punjab that you can see Toronto, because that's what the next closest city is
Hilarious.
for. Yeah. And the other point I noted when I moved to Canada, like you said, like parts of town which are Punjabi are, they're not new immigrants. They've been there for a long time. So in some ways, their impression of India is also from back in that, and India's obviously evolved a lot, and especially after 1991 when the economy opened up. So I find that it's a very different and often, for lack of a better word, ancient view of how the country is and how social norms are and things like that. And that was just something which I found very interesting.
In fact, if I can add an anecdote there,
Yeah,
this is the opposite of what you're saying, but on the same, I guess, lines. When I moved to Surrey, me and my husband actually first we lived with family and then we moved to our own home. And we
yeah,
moved to a really Indian part of Surrey, which is called Newton, and it's primarily Indians. And I remember like growing up in Delhi, I had a washer dryer. My clothes would dry in a dryer. Most people in Delhi don't, but I was a unique person that did.
yeah, yeah,
And people had like their laundry out in the balconies. I was like, oh my God. Like it was to me, that was shocking because even though I had grown up in India and seeing it here, I was like, this
hmm,
is most people in India don't do this anymore. Like,
yeah,
they won't put it out
true.
right and open. So yeah, you're
Hmm.
right. Like there's some of that is just stuck in time. And even the impression of Indians that come is stuck in time. So they think you are the same person that, they would imagine
Yeah.
have been yeah. So it's all
Yeah, and that carries forward to the second generation as well. I see so many kids of techies here in Seattle They know Bharatnatyam, they know Sanskrit. I don't know a single person in India who learned Sanskrit,
Exactly.
right?
I mean, I did, but that's
Yeah,
just because
okay.
the marks were more in boards. You
Yeah,
got.
now I know one person. But yeah, so for that reason, I dropped my mother tongue Gujarati and took French instead because you
Yeah.
could score more marks in
Exactly.
the different point. I didn't learn enough to really be fluent in French because the focus is on, in India, the education system, it's on, not on immersing you in the language, it's on like memorizing all the different words, etc. But yeah, that was a great point to be made about the Punjabi community. In Punjab, is Canada the premier destination or is UK a more prestigious destination?
I mean, I should not speak for everyone in Punjab. I don't think
Sure.
I'm representative, but my best guess is that definitely UK, because the kind of people that move to Canada versus UK, I think UK is a little more educated professional, but I don't know. I mean,
Sure.
I could be a biased
Yeah,
view.
in the Gujarati community, the hierarchy is very clear. The US is at the top, and
Yep.
then you have the UK, then you have Australia, Canada, and
Yep.
then you have other places where Gujaratis go as traders, like East Africa or whatever. Those are not relevant these days,
Yeah.
but these are kind of the top places. Okay, so you moved to Canada as an adult and not as a child. And were your kids born in Canada?
One of them was born in the US and the other one was born in Canada. So we are.
Okay. How do you balance the mix of cultures? My son, born in Canada, lives in the US most of his life. And we have, both those. I mean, they're more similar to each other than, say, Indian culture is, but
For sure.
there's still something distinct about Canadian life and American life. And then obviously the Indian angle that his parents are predominantly Indian. How do you balance these three identities? Does one take over the others, or are you just throwing everything at your kids and seeing what sticks?
Honestly, I guess I'm sort of unique that, and not just me, but people around me as well, my family, that we don't care that much about preserving a specific version of culture. I
Sure.
think we probably, because we grew up moving a lot, and
Right.
the community I come from, my grandfather often says we used to be originally be gypsies, like
Hmm.
many generations before. So I guess
Yeah.
that's part of kind of just who we are culturally. We are
Yeah.
very adaptive and we are very open to just rolling with it. So
Sure.
my kids celebrate Diwali if they want to. If they don't want to, they don't. We don't celebrate Holi because I don't like getting wet and
Yeah.
getting dirty, but we might start doing it if they want to. They definitely
Right.
celebrate Halloween because, that's fun. And they also celebrate Christmas. So we kind of do whatever. Thanksgiving, we do it because, it's nice. I like the idea of having gratitude. So
Sure.
if we learn about a new custom or festival or, tradition that feels good to me and to my family, I think we'll just do it. But again,
Right.
none of that is done dogmatically or like karna hi karna hai, like we don't have
Sure.
any of those. We're not
A
very
particular way
religious.
to.
Yeah, and we're not
Sure.
very religious, which adds to it, right? Like there's
Yeah.
no you have to do it X way. We just roll with it.
Beyond just the religious aspects, what about culture? Like, for me and my wife, it's a constant struggle between, is he going to go to cricket camp or baseball camp? Or, do we train him in chess, which is, something considered a nice thing to learn in India, or do we put him in ice skating? So, does the same thing apply for those types of things as well?
I mean, I would just sit down. I would probably, if I could, expose my kids to both and see what they like. I strongly believe it's not my job to tell my kid what they should and shouldn't do. It is my job to expose them to as many things and to
Yeah.
encourage and facilitate. And
Yeah.
I don't have any at all set expectations for what my kids become or don't become, as long as they're
Yeah.
adults that speak their mind and are kind and
Yeah.
caring about the world. That's it.
Yeah.
So
So
whatever
if
they
they
do is
don't
fine.
become a lawyer or an engineer, it's okay.
Lawyer,
Yeah.
engineer. I mean, I studied sociology and I became an entrepreneur. You can tell I have
Yeah.
no sense of
Yeah.
what education means.
Yeah.
So
When I was growing up, so my last name is occupational last name. It means accountant. And my grandfather is an accountant. My parents are accountants who don't practice, but they are CAs or CPAs as you call them here. So it was a bit of a disappointment for at least my grandfather that I didn't become an accountant. And then because he was a freedom fighter, I guess I offended him more by going to London Business School and paying money to the
to the
British.
ground.
And then my brother became a stand-up comic, so then the pressure was off of me, and he's the black sheep in the family now. But yeah, I generally agree with you. My parents have always been like, do what you want, but just make sure you excel at it and do a good job and do it properly. So cool. That was an interesting conversation. I do want to go into your early days in India. So you said you studied sociology. Where did you study and how did you end up at Google?
Yeah, so I studied at LSR, Delhi University, and I ended up at Google through a college placement. So they came to campus, recruited few people, and I got selected. So that's pretty much it. I was at the bottom rung as far as Google is concerned. The fact that I was at Google was cool, but the job I was doing was as basic as it gets. But yeah, it was still a lot of fun. I was there only for a year and a half, but I still have friends that will be friends for life from there. And we all kind of grew up together. So
yeah. So when they hire, computer science and engineers, there's certain, I guess, tracks or paths for those people. What were sociology majors being hired for?
So they were hiring for all kinds of things, but the job I got hired for was Google AdWords. It was called the bin, my team, like literally dustbin. Our job was to review ads that show up on Google. We were actually physically, manually reviewing them. And we were saying, is there any pornographic content? Is anything, violent, anything unsafe for kids? And of course, there was an algorithm that was doing a bunch of things. But back, like maybe 15 years back when I was at Google, it wasn't very effective. So we were still doing a lot of the manual review. I didn't spend too much time in that team, thankfully, because it was mind-numbing work. I moved to another team within a couple of weeks. And there I was actually doing sales work, where I was working with advertisers in Australia, Vietnam, Philippines, some in the US as well, where I was actually helping them understand the Google platforms and getting them to spend more money on advertising dollars.
So sort of like customer success and ad sales at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I used to run a digital agency in India in the mid 2010s. Yeah, so I'm a little bit familiar with that role and what you're talking about. On that note, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk about your move to Canada and your early days there and how you got settled there. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these.
When you're high, you feel different. You think different, you talk different, you draw different, you listen to music different, but you probably knew that. Problem is, you also drive different, and not in a good way. That's why driving high is illegal everywhere. So if you're high, just don't drive. Make a plan to get a sober ride. Because if you feel different, you drive different. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diasporaa, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diasporaa offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diasporaa Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
There's a reason they invented the internet. It's called 1150kknw.com.
Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We're talking to Zoya Brar, a serial entrepreneur and a parent of 2 kids. So before we get back to talking to Zoya, I want to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our episodes in video format there, right from the first one. So Zoya, after Google, did you jump directly into entrepreneurship or was there anything else in between?
No, it was direct. I would say even before Google, I was kind of exposed to entrepreneurship. So during college, I started working with this uncle of mine who used to run beginner-only colleges, and he was an entrepreneur who had kind of self-taught himself. And after college, I used to go and spend 4 or 5 hours being his EA. So he would make me do all kinds of dirty work, including, drafting things and following up with sales. Like I was doing all kinds of things, but I learned so much. He was actually an entrepreneur doing it. So that exposed me. And then while I was at Google, at some point, I started feeling like this, I don't want to die in this company. I want to do more with my life. And one of my friends who ended up being my co-founder was looking to quit, and he quit. And I was helping him figure out what business he should start. And while talking to him, I was like, okay, this is too exciting. I can't let you do this alone. I'm going to quit too. So I quit and I jumped right into Core.
And what does Core do exactly, and how did you come up on that idea?
Yeah, I haven't talked about that in so long, but Core is a molecular diagnostics lab. We do testing for COVID, cancer, all kinds of genetic disorders. And When we started it in 2010-11 timeframe, there wasn't a lab like that in India. There was very little that was available if you wanted to do advanced genetic testing. And I'd like to believe really revolutionized that and changed that over the decade. Core got acquired by Metropolis in December 24. So just like last year.
Metropolis, at least in Bombay, everybody knows
For
it.
sure. It's India's second largest diagnostic lab and it's huge. So they acquired us. And then, of course, now the company still exists, but under the Metropolis brand.
Yeah.
And how I came upon that idea, my mother is a doctor. So, when you were telling the story about how your parents were disappointed you were not an accountant, I was taken back to how my mother became a doctor, because that was kind of the thing.
Right.
But so she was a doctor. She was handling she was at Max and Fortis, and she was managing hospitals. And from her lens, she often could see that whilst therapy was world class. So, we all have heard of this. If you want really, really world class surgery or care, you can go to India and get it at a very subsidized price. But when you came to diagnostics, which is the first starting point, there was just no option. So you had to still ship samples to the US or to Europe or UK to get basic diagnosis. That made no sense to me. I was like, if therapy has caught up with the rest of the world, why shouldn't diagnostics? So with that basic thinking, I went and started. and that's how
was this end patient facing, storefront labs, or were they like a B2B where the metropolises of the world would send their samples for testing?
It wasn't metropolises of the world. Sometimes, yes, but it was more hospitals. So we were tying up with hospitals that had, let's say, cancer care, and we were providing the diagnostics to them. And then we were also working with patients directly, because at the end of the day, especially when it comes to diseases like cancer, the family gets really involved. They want to know the diagnosis. They want to talk to a doctor. So we were we were more B2B2C, I would say, because eventually most people probably know that India is self-pay, which means even if it's the hospital sending the patient to us, typically it's the patient who's eventually paying. So from that, it was complex because we had to also sell to the doctors, but we also had to sell to the end patient.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I remember talking to someone about how learned to appreciate India's health system more after coming to this part of the world.
For sure.
And, because you have both options, like Canada, you can go to a government hospital and get free care of whatever standard. And then if you have money and you want to get the best care, you can do that too. And my friends here don't understand the concept where I can walk into a metropolis and say, I want an X-ray because I want an X-ray. And I want it now. And here's $10 or whatever, $20, and I'll get an X-ray. And
exactly.
That kind of amazes people in this part of the world.
It amazed me as well when I came to Canada and I went to the US, because same reason. I was like, wow, my healthcare is in somebody else's hands.
Yeah. My son was born in Canada, and, the hospital experience can really be hit or miss depending on the doctors, whatever the situation is at that day. When my wife was about to deliver, we actually got sent back home because she was not fully ready to deliver. And, they're like, oh, we don't want to use up the bed and I thought of that movie Munna by MBBS where they're saying that this bed is reserved for someone else. And because in Bombay, we knew enough people to get into whatever hospital we wanted. And that's unfortunate in a way that you have to know someone for those high-end hospitals. But that was what we were used to. So here to be sent away was very, very unnerving in that sense. So after this company was acquired, were you consciously looking to move abroad, or did Eli just happen and that drove the decision?
No, I actually moved here in 2020. So before the company got acquired, and Ellie only happened in 2022. What drove the decision was not professional at all. It was personal. So in 2017, me and my husband sat down and we said to each other, if we're ever going to have kids, it has to be outside, because 2017 was the year when those that have lived through this will remember Delhi's pollution for the first time became unbearable to the extent that we would have 4 air purifiers in the room at any time to breathe. Yeah. And that was one. And the other was, even though I was this high-flying CEO, I was constantly scared. I would fly down to Indira Gandhi Airport at 2 a.m. from somewhere, and I would be on the phone with my husband the whole time saying, I'm driving, or my driver who I trust is driving me back, but just stay on the call in case something happens to me.
From a physical security and crime perspective.
And I couldn't, for example, after 7 or 8, I would feel uncomfortable staying back at office. I own this place and I would feel okay. So that kind of constantly watching were behind. Like as a woman, it was just, I just couldn't feel free anywhere.
The lived experience in India for women is completely different than it is for men, and most men have no clue like what women go through on a daily basis. Like
Yep.
I have been to Goa a bunch of times with my guy friends, and then the first time I went with my wife, and walking on Kalangut beach, and I'm like, why is everybody staring at us? And my wife's like, yeah, welcome to my world. Like
Yep.
this is 24/7, and that kind of, as a 25-year-old newly married person, that's when it actually struck me how different it is. We didn't have that level of pollution in Bombay, and safety has always been one of the strengths of Bombay in that sense. But the air was definitely one of the reasons I wanted to move out as well. It probably adds 5 years to your life if you live in clean air.
More. I think probably
And,
more. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been here 7 years. I still find myself just taking a moment to appreciate the fresh air. I don't think people here appreciate, especially this, lower mainland Pacific Northwest, where the air is especially cleaner.
Yeah, it's really.
I don't think people appreciate what they have in terms of just the ability to breathe and take a deep breath and not need. This time, when I went back, my brother's got one of the Kia SUVs. There's a permanent air filter reading in the central panel. Like you have your temperature, outside temperature. It has a permanent AQI reading in there. Because
Wow.
that's such a important thing in day-to-day life. So then when you decide to move abroad, was Canada a natural choice? Or because for me, I was leaving India. I wasn't necessarily moving to Canada. I didn't care where I went. So were you more focused on leaving India, or were you focused on going to Canada, if that makes sense?
Actually, neither. I was neither actively leaving nor was I actively coming to Canada. So few people in my family. So back in 2015, people from my family had moved within the last 2 years. But when I was in 2017, few people, like one of my cousins and one of my aunts had moved, and they liked it here. And so we are, like I said, a gypsy family, but we are also one of those families that all moves in hordes. So one person moves, everybody wants to move behind them. So my mother went like, oh, she's moved. Why don't you also apply? And that's how we applied. So we're not even sure we were going to move. And then 2019, we got our PR. My husband moved. I was still running my business, and I was like, I'm not moving. We'll see, in the future. Then 2020 happened, and I came to visit my husband, and I got pregnant. And this was April 2020, when the borders had shut down, and I was stuck here being Canada. And I thought, I'm now not going to risk, this little baby in the middle of a pandemic. So I'll just stay here and we'll figure it out. And I haven't been back to India ever since. So I don't know.
Wow. My son was born in November 2019. And when he was 2 months old, in January 2020, we went to India because, we don't have any family in Canada. And my 4 grandparents and her 4 grandparents are all based in Bombay for multiple generations. So we have enough people to fill a stadium in Bombay. So we went in January. We flew on Air China through Beijing.
Wow.
And we were like, why are all these people wearing masks? And I thought, in Hong Kong, they have this SARS thing, and people in that part of the world tend to be extra cautious about their masks or whatever. And then, I came back. By the time I was supposed to come back 2 weeks later, my flight had been canceled. So I made up, a different route and made it back to Canada because I had just started a job with a startup. But they eventually got stuck for 6 months almost.
Oh, wow.
And they came back. My son went as a 2-month-old and I saw him as an 8-month-old.
Oh, that's terrible.
And they came back on one of those Air India Vande Bharat flights, which was, stressful enough experience by itself. So that was and funny story is the day I resumed work, I got laid off in Canada.
Oh my God. So you were stuck here without work by yourself
without work, lockdown, and without family. And I used that downtime to set up my 4th startup, which was a platform to help new immigrants in Canada. So something good did come out of it.
But wow.
But my infant son probably thought, who is this uncle who keeps video calling every day for all you know? How were your early days in Canada? I know you mentioned a reverse culture shock, but were there any other kind of nuances or differences that you noticed? And coming from Delhi, you're not necessarily coming from a developing country. You're coming from a big global city.
Yeah.
So what were some of those oddities that you noticed in the first few days?
I'm not going to say anything new here, but I guess I'll just tell you what was my experience. I found it so quiet. Where is the sound? I couldn't sleep at night. I was like, what's going on? I had to put on one of those sound things on my
White
phone.
Noise.
Exactly. I was like, what is going on? And it's so scary because that kind of sound in India means like something's really gone off if it was that quiet. So that was really odd for me. And it took me, even though I've traveled a lot globally, like this wasn't the first place I was moving. I'd lived in Singapore, I've been, but somehow just moving to another country and living there for a long time is different than when you're visiting and in a hotel, or, like it just, I guess living in a neighborhood is different. So that was really odd. The second thing I noticed was how everything shuts down, like at 5, 6, like everything is dead. And I was like, and especially I came during the pandemic, so everything was just always dead. But especially after 5, 6, like people just, you can't see anyone outside. And we come to life around that time, right? Because most people end up working till 6, 7 in the evening, and India really actually like wakes up then. So that was super odd. I still find that odd and calming, but also a little bit disruptive to my way of being. And then I can't get over the sky. It's not odd, but I simply cannot get over. It's like you were saying, the breathing. 10 times a day, tell my kids, oh my God, look at the sun, look at the clouds, and they look at me like, our mom is odd. Like, why is she so obsessed with the sky? I'm like, you have no idea how special this is.
You probably would have to go to Kashmir to see that sky in India.
Even in India, I mean, I've never been to Kashmir, so I shouldn't speak, but I don't think you'd get this kind of 365 days, just blue sky. It's really, really luxurious.
One of the oddities that I found, which I haven't probably shared on the show yet, and if you know anything about Bombay trains, you'll appreciate this now.
I have actually traveled in one of those, like, to save my life with, so no.
I like to pick up a local newspaper when I go to a new place. And one of the articles was that the Vancouver transit was so crowded these days and the ridership was so high that people these days, if they bump into you, they don't say sorry. And the trains I saw, it comes to the airport in Vancouver. So I thought that's like one of those toy trains that goes within the terminal, like from like A to B. And I was like, oh, this is the transit system. Oh, wow. Okay, let's go in this. And then we took it to downtown and it was like, dude, like this is a joke. But then, Bombay trains carry 7 million people a day. Vancouver has 2.5 million people. So you got to put that into context. But I just found it very funny that, saying sorry is a thing, because in India, you have, forget about seats, there's people hanging out of the train. There's sometimes people hanging on to those people who are hanging out of the train, right? So it's a real struggle. And then here it's like, wow, this is a real first world problem where, someone bumped into me and didn't apologize.
But you were saying about Bombay being safe, and that's the difference between Bombay and Delhi. Like in Bombay, I could actually travel by that very crowded local and not feel like somebody is going to, molest me. Whereas in Delhi, I would never do it. So I know what you mean.
The other thing is we were staying in Richmond, which is a predominantly Asian part of town. And we went to a mall to get our SIM cards. And there was like 9 Chinese restaurants in the food court and 1, I think, Korean or Japanese. And my wife's like, you said we're coming to Canada. And this is, I'm like, it's probably like a part of town we're not familiar with. So give it some time. The next day we go to Surrey and, we're at the Sabzi Mandi. And then my wife is again like, you said we're coming to Canada. And I said, I don't know what it is, but we seem to just be going to these immigrant neighborhoods. So let's go to downtown and see what it's like. And then we were like, okay, here are all the white people. So it was. And I had been to Vancouver for a day before to catch a cruise ship to Alaska. I think probably 11 years before I moved there. Wife had never been to Canada. But at least, because I had lived in the US, there was something like, what to expect. Like, driving on that side of the road is not a challenge. So our move was a lot smoother than it would have been for other people, right? Because the non-Punjabi demographic that moves to Canada has not lived abroad. They're not coming in to study or into some ecosystem they can plug into. They're just coming out cold. And they don't know how credit scores work. They don't know where the Indian store is. They don't know how to make a resume that's friendly for a Canadian recruiter. So it can be a real challenge. And I think like now my wife appreciates that us having that much exposure really, helped us get going quicker. And also the fact that we didn't go to Surrey, we went to downtown and we were surrounded by everyday mainstream Canadians versus just other immigrants who then have a very similar shared experience. I think that also made a big difference. So let's take another break here and then let's talk about your work in Canada and then the current project that's keeping you busy. So we'll be right back after these messages.
I'm Chris Jakovic. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakovic, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. Store all your guns securely. Help stop suicide. My service never stops.
Brought to you by End Family Fire and the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Alternative Talk 1150 online at 1150kknw.com.
Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Zoya Brar, a serial entrepreneur and founder of Molecules and Mothers. Before we jump back into the conversation, if you like listening to our show, please consider following us on Instagram or leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. So, Zoya, you said there was a gap in between you moving to Canada and then you working for LE Health. So that was the time when you sold your company, wrapped up all of that, and then decided to work locally. Is that right?
No, actually, that's not how it happened. Kept running my startup virtually for a year. And then at the end of 2020, when my baby he was born in December 2020. And by then I told the board, I thankfully had a successor already identified because I eventually wanted to move here. So they knew. So I handed over to him on Zoom. Then I took a whole year and 2 months off, which was luxurious with my first kid. And Canada that way is really amazing. Like, I think everybody needs to learn from them on how to do maternity and paternity leave. And I had the real luxury of being here. Plus, I think somewhere the fact that it was a pandemic really helped because we were stuck with nowhere to go and this little baby. And so it was like, okay, my whole world is literally this child. So I did that. My startup was still running in the background. I was not operationally involved, but I was a shareholder. And then in 2022, after my baby became like over a year old, I was like, okay, now I will either kill myself or somebody at home will kill me if I stay home any longer. So I started looking for what to do. And at that point, I applied to LE Health. It was a LinkedIn job posting. And they actually had a product manager role open, which I applied for. And the founder looked at my resume, and she's now a friend. And she looked at it and she's like, either this woman is a big con woman. I mean, she says she's been CEO of this VC funded company and now she's applying for a product manager role, or she's totally crazy. And I was just an immigrant who didn't know what I would get, right? So she got on a call with me and we really hit it off. And she said, forget product manager. Will you join me as, you tell me what you'll join me as. And so I said, I think, why don't we call me chief of staff and I can be your right-hand person. And I've been a CEO before, so I should be able to help you in various areas. And she said yes. And I'm still doing the same role, but I'm called COO now, but I've been there ever since. And I still work with them. That really is my full-time job and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, when I moved here, I had in my digital agency been part of a launch for something called RuPay card in India, which is now used by over 1 billion people.
Yep.
So when you come from India, you worked at scale.
Exactly.
And I got asked all the time here, but what is your Canadian experience? And I said, it's irrelevant when, I've built and sold startups and whatever. So I actually had to dumb down my resume. And so great example, product manager, right? So I would send a resume which said product specialist, product manager, senior product manager, and then list out only those things that I had done as a product manager. Of course, as a founder of a company, you've done 100 other things.
Yeah.
But that's the only way I could get interviews, is because then the HR person would understand what that meant versus... you had the founder look at the resume and they were able to instantly pick up like the actual depth of talent and exposure. But a lot of people face this, as new immigrants and don't know how to navigate it. Yeah. And then they end up in what we call those survival jobs. And,
Amazon warehouse.
Amazon warehouse. And, I worked for Amazon in Canada as a warehouse expansion manager. So I've launched 26 warehouses in Canada.
Yeah.
Last mile warehouses. So these folks who were doing these survival jobs, they were getting jobs in the warehouses I was launching.
Exactly.
And I've had so many conversations around this that if you're in finance and your survival job is a teller in a TD bank, that's any day preferable than you coming and doing it here, because here your avenues are very limited. But that's again a factor of going to a place like Surrey and being around only other new immigrants. So you don't really have anyone to tell you these things. And we were lucky that the one person we knew in the whole country, he plugged us into his ecosystem, and they were all people who had been there for 20 years. So we didn't get to hear that Canada Post is hiring. Why don't you go there? We got
Or
to hear,
Walmart is hiring.
Walmart is, yeah. So we got to hear that, oh, this is your background. You should not say yes to anything below 150K a year.
Yeah.
Right. So that really made a difference in forming our baseline, which unfortunately a lot of new immigrants don't have. I think the government has some initiatives to help new immigrants understand how things
English.
work. But yeah, English, and they teach you about indigenous First Nations and all of that. But in terms of real practical stuff, like this is what your resume needs to look like. These are the right things to say in an interview. That is, I think, still missing to a large extent.
For sure.
So once you joined Ely Health, tell us more about what the company does.
Yeah, we have built actually the first at-home test for cortisol and progesterone. So in simple terms, looking at your stress at home using saliva, which is nobody has ever done this before. And this is a Canadian startup that now, of course, is available in the US as well. VC funded, and we're a small team, 25 people, but I think doing some really game-changing work. So I love it. It's a perfect place.
So I want to segue on this. How is the startup ecosystem in Vancouver these days?
I actually was not part of the startup ecosystem at all in Vancouver, because between 2020 and 2023, I kind of was a hermit. I lived at home and I didn't go out at all. I also had my second baby in 2022. So I was either pregnant or had a newborn or pregnant with a newborn for a long time. And the startup that I work with is actually Montreal based. So I can speak to that ecosystem. I think it's pretty flourishing. But Vancouver, I don't know much about it, unfortunately.
I found it to be a pretty small ecosystem where the minute you become high growth or you need serious funding, you have to move. Like Slack, it was formed in Yaletown, but then they had to move to the Bay Area or whatever. Also, I think the Canadian outlook is a bit more conservative in general to America. And that whole think big thing is kind of missing, because everyone's very hyper focused and local focused, which is a shame, because Vancouver is a global city and they'd worked hard to become globally known, and they had the Winter Olympics and all of that. And now when the whole world is trying to move there and buying a property and doing whatnot, people don't like it. And they say, oh, these outsiders are coming and buying up our property. But that's what's going to happen if you try to attract a global population and have a global profile. So I think a lot of these things need catching up in Vancouver. As great a place it is to live, that whole kind of pool of global talent is not there yet. And maybe that's because there's no Fortune 500 company headquartered there, right? Like Seattle, you can see those legions of corporate employees between not just Amazon, Microsoft, but even Boeing, Starbucks, Nordstrom, Costco, T-Mobile, Alaska Airlines. So that's definitely something that I haven't seen in the 7 odd years that I've been living / going back to Vancouver a lot. So tell us more about Molecules and Mothers. Again, what is it about and how did it come about?
So I would say it's a passion project for now. I founded it with my mother. So as I mentioned earlier, I did this startup which was on the molecular diagnostics side. And as part of that work, I really understand the impact of genetics on health and well-being. When I started, or when I really became a parent, it became acutely obvious to me that we don't have too much science behind parenting decisions. It's very, my mother did it and her mother did it, so this is how it should be done. The moment you start asking the basic question and say, should I really be spoon feeding my child? Or, should I really be forcing my child to wear his jacket? Or should I really be, there is no real good answer there. There are lots of influencers and, blogs and other things. But as somebody who believes in science, if I said, okay, show me the data, there isn't any. So that's the gap I think I want to fill. Not I think, I want to fill, which is connecting the parenting choices and the scientific and health outcomes that come from those choices, whether it's immunity, whether it's diseases like, all kinds of diseases. They say genes actually only cause 5%. 95% is caused by your environment. And parenting is, in my opinion, the largest chunk of what you can change and what you can influence. So that's what I'm doing, a lot of different things there, starting with writing a book on where I'm looking at my own family and tracing trauma and stories and how they get passed on. So that's a work in progress. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. But that's what that's about. Yeah.
One example that comes to mind is my wife's mother had come and stayed with us for some time when my son was very young. And she was aghast that we wanted to take our son outside before 40 days. Because I don't know if it's a pan-India thing or just our...
It is a pan-India thing, but I have had the same experience.
So 40 days, you can't take the child out. And I'm like, yeah, that's because the air is dirty and it's dusty. We took him out on, I think, the 17th day. But before she could say anything, we ourselves freaked out. Like, should we be really doing this just to prove her wrong? And then we came back home very quickly.
Funny.
I want to revisit the point you made about this whole multi-generation immigration that happened together. What advantages did it bring to have so much family where you landed, and what disadvantages did it bring?
I mean, from my own lens, I can't think of any disadvantage. I can think of disadvantages from my grandparents' lens. So me and 3 of my cousins, my mother and both her sisters, their spouses, and my grandparents, my nana, nani, all moved together, and all our spouses as well. So literally everyone moved. For my generation, I think there were only advantages because we are young enough that we could all find jobs and restart and not, of course, we all took a step down for a short while, but eventually you catch up. We have the support of having grandparents and great grandparents for our kids. Like, how special is that? We have the ability to, kind of have best of all worlds, right? So I think my generation, I don't think anyone will say it's like, I've had conversations with my cousins and my brother, and we're all very happy with this decision. For my mother and her generation, I think it was hard because my mother, for example, was running like 10 or 12 hospitals, some of the largest hospital systems in India. She's a doctor, really well respected. She couldn't find a job here. Like, she's looked for the last 6 years. She even applied to the survival jobs, and even they wouldn't hire her because she's too old, right? And the other guys would not hire her because even though she has had experience in so many countries and done so many things, it's not relevant to work here.
Right. And medicine is one of those professions.
Exactly. So for her generation in general, it's been hard because they retired before they wanted to retire in some ways, and they still are happy that they have their grandkids and good life here, but it's not. And for them to come here and start doing their own dishes, cleaning, it's not something that they're used to.
Oh yeah, it's hard. One of my guests is a CRO of a educational company, and he moved from Sri Lanka as a educated immigrant, and he got rejected for a job selling newspapers at the railway station.
My mother can tell you stories like that, like literally.
Yeah, it requires a different level of tenacity. I think our parents' generation anyways has a lot more grit than our generation is used to, but it can be emotional damage in that sense, right?
Yeah.
When you get rejected. So for your grandparents, it wasn't like we'll come hang out for some time while the child is young. They also moved like permanently.
Because my grandparents, we're a very unique family in the sense that they always grew, there were only 3 daughters. And they always lived with one of their daughters, even after they got married. So they had never lived alone. For them, they're both 90 plus at this age.
Oh, wow.
I mean, how do you live in India? Like, there's no system. And we've always been very close. So it wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a conversation. If we were moving, they were moving. And then all 3 of their daughters, all 4 of their grandkids, everybody was moving. So it was obvious. But it's hardest on, I think, my grandfather. My grandmother is very happy. She loves that she can take a walk, she can breathe, she can, she feels a lot more independent here than she did in India. My grandfather hates it because he's like, there's nobody I can talk to, there's no friends, there's no...
That was going to be my next question, that senior citizens tend to have an active social life in India. In their building, in their neighborhood, there's other people their age. So that's one reason my in-laws, and to an extent my parents, hate coming here because... they have such active social lives. They'll go hang out with their, the 5th floor neighbor and, whatever, right? Then they can't do that here. So we have actually tried to time our parents visiting when our neighbors' parents are visiting so that they have at least some company because they're from India as well. So it kind of works out.
Makes sense.
Any advice for someone moving at a later stage in their life, not as a student, not as a young person, but like moving with kids, moving in the middle of their career?
I would say 2 things. One, like try to move with family if you can. I know it's very easy said, like for somebody like me that had that luxury, but if you can, like having that, I often say this and I mean this, had I moved by myself, I would have moved back like definitely when my son was born. Like there's no way I could handle the life here. There's no support system. So you have to have your own.
Right.
And I didn't want to put my child in daycare. So that's just me,
Yeah.
right? But I'd say that if you can move with family, great. The second thing I'd say is kind of leave your ego behind in India. So if you can, you'll have to start at the bottom and not eventually, very quickly, you kind of rise and get back to where you were and do great work. But the first 3 to 5 years, you will likely be doing things that are like 10 steps below what you were doing in India. And that's part of, embracing why you're moving.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because I've seen folks who moved from, a Hyderabad and a Bangalore where they're making, 8 million rupees a year, right? So $100,000 a year. And they came to Canada in search of this whole passport, PR, immigration, whatever. And then they were like, oh, we used to live like kings in India, and here we have to do our own dishes. And even though they didn't take a career step back, right? Because they moved with a company and they were making more money and all of that, but they felt like they were nobody or they were middle class when in India they were top 5% or whatever. And this kind of got in the way of them enjoying their life in Canada. And then they got disillusioned and moved back. And I've seen this happen over and over again.
Yeah. And I think you have to be clear why you're moving, right? Like that why has to be, for me, it's a sky. And like I'd give up anything for it.
Please tell my wife when you talk to her next that the sky is indeed something to be appreciated, because I keep talking about the blue sky and she's like, I mean, get over it already. And I'm like, no, it's that great.
Yeah, don't get over it. That's my reason to stay here. So.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. Let's move to our weekly segments now. And so can our DJ spin the wheel, please? So this is one of our regular segments and it's called Maa Ka Khana, which in Hindi means mother's food. Now, since your mother is with you, the nostalgia aspect might be a little less. So I'll twist this question, is that when you do end up going back to India, what is that one food that you will eat right away? Because for me, the vada pav comes to the airport when I go to India. So what is that food for you, whether it's at home in India or like a restaurant or something that's your favorite?
Yeah, like you said, I have cooked food right here. So for me, I am going to India in November and I've already got like a list of 15 things that I need to eat. And every time like, I'm like, oh yeah, I have to add it. So I don't have one, but like I can name a top few, like Khan Chacha's rolls. Definitely.
I have been there in Delhi.
You have?
I have. Those, I mean, as a Bombay person, you should understand it's very difficult for me to accept that Delhi has a better food scene.
I've had the Bade Miya rules as well. So
I grudgingly accept that Delhi's street food is better. So.
Oh,
yeah.
No, but I can tell you, Bombay at Chowpatty Beach, there is this watermelon milkshake. I have never had a better watermelon milkshake anywhere. Right?
I believe it.
Bachelors, oh my God. Like
Bachelors,
I have lots of food memories.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I give myself 1 pound per week of weight gain of my vacation. So, yeah. But that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you for listening to Diaspora, and we hope you enjoyed hearing Zoya's phenomenal story. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the topics we discussed in today's episode. Diaspora is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows, including Diaspora, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also find us on YouTube. And lastly, if you know someone who has a story that can be shared on our show, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media handles. We'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. And until then, take care and stay curious. And Zoya, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.